Welcome to another episode of the Wandering Watercolor. Let's paint. So today we're painting the first page of the Chattanooga Scenery Watercolor Coloring book. I just finished this book last week. That's the cover of the book. And this first page, whenever we're finished painting it, will look something like this. Now, this is a page that I printed out. I don't have the original. It's currently at an art show. So the printer that I have isn't that good, so a lot of the colors came out a little darker. But that's kind of the general idea. This scenery is from downtown Chattanooga. It's kind of a cityscape that's across the street from Renaissance Park. It's a really nice area, and I really like this cityscape. So I thought it would be a good first iconic image to do in this book. As always, any brush works, whatever brush you have, along with your paint. This is just the paint that I make myself. You do not have to use the same paint. Any paint will work. It'll just look a little different. This is my dish where I like to mix my colors. I suggest using any porcelain dish to mix your colors. Literally anything will work, and they'll clean out. Watercolors clean very easily off of porcelain. They won't stain it. And then always having a scrap piece of paper and a towel or a paper towel, something that you can use kind of as a rag to dry your brush or pick up any mistakes to dab the paper. Also, 1 or 2 jars of water on the side, also always helpful. And that's pretty much it. So when we start, I always like to wet my watercolors first. You don't have to use a spray bottle like I'm using. Honestly, you could just pick up some water with your brush and then just put it directly on the color. I just like doing that because it helps. Like you're just basically letting the colors absorb the water. It makes them easier to work with. That's also just a preference. You don't actually have to do that. I know a lot of people that just go directly. So the first thing that we will work on is the water over here in the Tennessee River. And we're going to get some dark blue. I'm not going to use the technical names for any of the colors like phthalo blue or ultramarine or like quinacridone, sienna, like things like that. I'm not going to use any of those. I don't really think there's a need for that. As long as you understand kind of like the hue on the color wheel that we're going for, I think you're perfectly fine. It also makes it a little easier for consistency across palettes. So yeah, basically just grab some dark blue, and then we're also going to grab a hint of green. Usually most bodies of water have a bit of green in them, some more than others. And also depending on where it is, how much particulates are in the water, also a little bit of brown. And I think this is definitely too dark, so I'm going to add a little more blue, and that's probably fine. But I am going to dilute it with water. So the more water you have, the more it dilutes the pigment, which makes it lighter. So it's easier to layer. We'll go ahead and we'll start with kind of doing a flat wash all the way back here. That's closer to the actual landmass. Is just kind of like a straight line. And then we're going to do a little bit of, I'm going to leave some white streaks in the water, because if you look from a distance, you can always see the water kind of refracting, or the light refracting off of the waves or the ripples in the water, and that's kind of what gives those white or lighter highlights. And for our purpose, we will just use the white of the paper to show that. We don't really need much else at this stage in the painting, and just kind of ripple it through like that. It doesn't have to be perfect. Don't be too concerned. I find that watercolor always works better when you don't try to force it to be perfect. You just kind of have to let it be a little loose. Some of that chaotic, sporadic, kind of like organic look that it has if you just let it be instead of trying to muscle it into looking a certain way, I think always helps it look better. So that's pretty good. I'm just gonna add I think there's too much white over here, so I'm just gonna add a little more just to fill it in, because we're really going more for the highlights on the tips of the ripples of the water. We don't want it to look like there's actual gaps of white, just because that'll look a little weird. And I think that's just fine. Okay, so then the next thing that we will focus on is mixing the color for the trees that are over here, all the way over here, over here, and over here. And the way we'll do that is we'll grab some green and rinse our brush. We'll grab some yellow, a good amount of yellow, because yellow can be overpowered very easily by other colors that you're mixing it with. And this is a pretty good, yeah, this is a pretty good green. We want the base to be lighter, so the flat wash that we'll be using to block out the trees, we want that to be lighter so that when we add the shadow, it'll give it a nice contrast. So we'll go ahead and we'll just lay all of that in just like that. And if you go outside of the lines a little bit, not a big deal. Just try to, there's a light post over here. We're going to try to avoid the actual light part. The rest of it we can just paint right over, since we will be painting it dark color later on. Okay, we're doing all of that. We'll grab some more. And fill that in right here. Sorry if my hand shakes a little bit. I drank a lot of coffee today, running a ton of errands. Finally got time to sit down and paint. Well, maybe I'll calm down a bit after painting. Painting always has that effect on me. Okay, there we go. Okay, see, that's very simple, very easy. And we don't have to really worry about that any further. And you can kind of see, as it dries, the color lightens up. See, when we first laid it down, you can rewind a little bit in the video, you'll see how at first when we laid it down it seemed a lot darker, but now it seems much lighter, which is exactly what we want. We'll rinse our brush, and then we can actually get a little bit of the light blue up here. We don't want too much, but we do want enough of the pigment so that we can differentiate between the water and the sky. So the next thing that we will do is we'll go ahead and lay down the sky. And so I'm gonna tell you a little bit of a kind of like a trick or a hack, if you will. When you're painting clouds with watercolor, I mean, you can get really in depth with how to paint clouds. But the very easy, I shouldn't call it easy, but it's rather easy technique is just to do a light wash of the sky color and kind of leave some gaps for the clouds so that the white of the paper is just the clouds. And some of the formation of the clouds, the edges, you want them to have some sharp edges and then some fuzzy edges. And I'll go ahead and I'll show you what I mean right now. So first, we'll go ahead and we'll kind of do an outline with the blue around the mountain. That's Lookout Mountain in the back. And in reality, if you take a picture from Renaissance Park looking over to the Tennessee Aquarium, you actually can't really see the Lookout Mountain in there. It's a little bit more to the right and kind of further back, and depending on how the weather is, you may not really be able to see it. I just really wanted to throw it in there because it's a very iconic image for the city of Chattanooga, and I think most folks will appreciate that. Okay, so we'll go ahead and we'll kind of go around. Don't worry if you get a little bit into the mountain. It's totally fine. It does not have to be perfect. Okay, so you see how I'm kind of making sharp edges here, and then I'm going to grab some of my water and I'm going to dilute the blue, and then over here I'm just going to go like this and like that. Clear my brush, I'm gonna create kind of a soft edge. That's a cloud right there. And it doesn't look like much, but as we lay down the rest of the sky, you'll see how it'll work. Go a little bit like that, a little bit like that, over here. Don't worry about making it look perfect. If you worry about that, it'll definitely hinder you from enjoying the painting process and then making it look organic. And you actually want variation. You don't want it to be all kind of like, you see how we made a flat wash where it's all the same color? You don't want that in the sky, because the sky varies a lot with where the light is hitting it, where the clouds are. There's a lot going on there. It's very subtle. You don't want it to be harsh. It's very subtle. So you'll see this cloud over here, some of the edges are very sharp, some of them are not. We're going to create kind of a break in between the clouds here. And then I wet our brush a little more. And I'm just going to go like that. And then add a little more pigment down here around the skyline. And you want there to be more color towards the bottom and then less, kind of graded it out as you go up. And that's pretty much it for the sky for right now. We're not gonna worry about it too much. The only thing, I'm gonna dry my brush here a little bit. The only thing I might do is sometimes when you layer in colors, you get a little bit of this edge that's kind of like the pigment pulling from two different directions that creates that line. You can keep that in there, it'll make it look more organic, or you can just kind of fade it out while it's still wet. It has to be still wet. You dry out your brush and then you kind of go in and kind of mix it in, and kind of like over here, and that's that. And that's looks pretty much exactly how I wanted it to. So you can even go in if you want to and soften up some of the other edges. Just wet your brush and kind of create a little bit of a softer edge on some parts of the clouds. It does not have to be all of the clouds, but you can see how it creates that softness. Clouds are very interesting. If you ever get a chance to just practice painting clouds, you can get a really good feel of creating edges with watercolor. So you can see how the bottom is defined and some of the top, like this part of the upper portion of the cloud is sharp, but this one is soft, and it just makes it feel more realistic. Now, granted, we can go in and add shadow, more depth to the clouds, but because this painting is so small and we have so much more to do, that's not really necessary. In fact, when you add such minute detail to a small painting that has a lot of detail in it, it can clash with the rest of it. You want there to be parts of the painting that are detailed and intricate, and then you want some flowy, more free space so that it's more pleasant to look at, so it's not overpowering the viewer. I hope all that makes sense. And at any time, if you have questions, just throw them in the comments. I usually try to respond within 24 hours. Okay. And so now we can actually focus on painting these buildings right here. So this one and this one. So this is actually 3 buildings. There's one behind these two, and then this one. And also the buildings over here. In reality, these buildings have more of a red tint to them. These ones are kind of orangish. But we'll paint them all the same color just because we want consistency. Because what will happen is if you have just one orange over here, it just creates an anchor that the viewer can't really take their eyes away from. If you have the same color in multiple areas of the painting, it makes it, again, just easier to look at. So we're just going to grab some of the orange right here. I'm going to test it out on my sheet. And that looks pretty good. But that's too strong of an orange, so I will dull it down a little bit. And the complementary color of orange is blue, but we don't want to do that because it'll actually just make it, it'll bring it more towards gray. It'll kind of neutralize it. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of brown, just a little bit, not too much. And let's see how that looks. I think that's perfect right there. Okay. And basically, I'm just going to lay that in at the base where all the stripes are here. And also in the dark parts that are kind of blocked in here. But I will avoid the little white square because that's like a window or a light. We want to leave that white. And then we'll proceed and go in here. So this one and this one, there's two little windows along with this one over here. We just want to leave all of that to be white so that we can tell that they're windows from a distance. And then we'll grab a little more of our color. We'll go ahead and we'll just lay that in. And this is a flat wash. A flat wash is where it's just the straight color. We're not trying to do any kind of gradients. We're not trying to do any texture. You're just laying in the foundational color. Now there may be some variance of where like some more pigment pools in other areas. That's totally fine. As long as there's some consistency to how you do it, it'll look fine. And then we'll go ahead. And don't worry if you cover up some of like the smaller details. Again, not a big deal. You're really, when you're doing scenery, there's just so much information. You just kind of want to get the general idea through to the viewer so they can kind of make sense of it. It works better that way. You can look at a lot of the works of the Impressionists and how they paint scenery from afar, because the details are hard to make out in real life when you look at a scenery from afar. It's actually better because you let your brain participate in the viewing and kind of, it's almost a collaborative work. Anyway, so that looks good so far. I'll go ahead and I'll switch out my plate just because I have a very small plate. If you have a large, like a dinner plate or something, you should have more than enough space. And some people actually like just painting directly from the palette to the paper, and that's fine. I actually really enjoy doing that whenever I'm sketching scenes on the spot, if I have to be quick, like if I'm sketching people or scenes. But since this is an instructional video, it's better to go this way. Okay, so we'll be mixing the gray, which will be for most of the bridge here, along with this little support area. And the way we'll do that is we will grab a little bit of this light blue. That's a good amount. That may be a little more than we need, but that's fine because we're going to neutralize it by putting a lot more brown. See, when we mix blue and brown together, especially light blue and brown, you get a really nice kind of an organic gray. And I say organic because if you just use straight black and you try to lighten it up with blue, it looks a lot more synthetic, kind of like more like metal as opposed to rock. And okay, the only thing is this is too dark, or actually it's almost exactly where we need it. So I'm just gonna add a little more water because it will dry lighter. I think this is, yep, that's fine. That's perfect. And we're just going to go ahead and lay all of that in. Again, just right where over the darker hatching that I laid in is, we'll go ahead and we'll do that. That looks good. And then we'll go ahead and we'll lay it in right here. Now here we do want to leave a little bit of white. Not because that there's white over here if you look at it in real life, but we just want a little bit of a rest area for our eyes, because as we keep adding color to the painting, we do want those anchor points of white to be all throughout the painting, like here in the water, over here in the windows. And the reason being is when you're doing watercolor, it's always good to have a certain amount of the paper showing through. It adds a little more uniformity to the painting. Because if you painted every part of the image and you just had one spot that's white, it'll immediately draw the viewer's attention to just that spot. Okay, so doing all of that. And then we're going to do that. So this is all concrete. So we're just covering it in we're going to leave this little spot white as well. We're just covering in all of the concrete. This bridge is going to be more of blue-green, more on the gray side, because it's kind of like old metal. I think you can probably imagine kind of an old blue-green gray sort of metal. That's where we'll be going for here. But we don't want to put that in right now because we want this to dry. If we go ahead and we paint it while this is drying, it'll just bleed in. And sometimes that can be a desired effect, but that's not what we're going for here. So the next part, we want to block in this mountain in the background. And we will do that by getting some green. And then we're going to add a little bit of brown just to make it darker since it is further back. You can't make out the color as much when it's further back. Let me see how that looks. That looks pretty good. We do want to add a little bit of the dark blue. Not too much, just a little, because the dark blue can be a little overpowering. So let's see. This should be a good color. Yeah, that's a perfect color for that. That's a good background color. And we'll go ahead and we'll put that in. If you're working only with the primary colors, then I would suggest maybe mixing some green and then adding some red to it. So you would want to mix yellow and blue to get the green, and then adding a little bit of red to that and kind of play around. Having a color wheel in front of you is always helpful when you're painting, if you haven't memorized it. I have it pretty well memorized. I still forget sometimes. I actually have a color wheel image that I just grabbed from the internet, and I have it saved on my phone, so I can do a quick reference at any time if I'm out and about sketching. But when you do that, you pretty quickly start to memorize what it looks like. Okay, and this is just a flat wash. We're not really trying to build up any texture or anything. We're just doing a flat wash here. And if there's areas that look a little different than others, that's fine. Not a big deal. There we go. So that looks good. Okay, so we just laid all of that in. I'm gonna rinse our brush. Next, we're going to put in some color over here in the buildings that are all the way in the background over here. And those will be more of a blue-gray, of a dark blue-gray. So the gray mixture that we have here, we're just going to add some dark blue to it. A little more. And let me just check how that looks. That looks a little bit too much like the river water that we have over here. So we're just going to grab more. And I'm going to grab some brown. Okay, that's a pretty good... It's a pretty good blue-gray. And I want it to be a little more on the blue side. Just because we want that differentiation between the concrete here and... Even though it is concrete, those buildings are made out of concrete, things tend to get more blue as they go further back in the background, just because of the atmosphere. It adds a blue shade to things. Okay, that's good. And we do want to leave, there's a little square here, we want to leave that, there's actually 2 or 3 little squares here that we want to leave those white, just again to show that there's something there. And I'm trying to paint around these little light posts that are here. The light posts themselves, we will also be leaving them white. In real life, those light posts I think are a very dark blue-green color. But if we paint them dark blue-green or black from this distance, they're just gonna kind of disappear. So we're just gonna leave them white. It just helps. It just helps with how it looks. And even if you come out of the line a little bit and into other objects, it's fine. gonna clean my brush. Okay, I'm just gonna step back for a moment. Okay, that looks pretty cool. I like it. And next, I'll go ahead and I'll switch my palette back, or I guess mixing, not my palette, my mixing plate. And then the green that we used to put in all of the trees here, we're gonna add just a little bit of brown to it. Just a little bit, not too much, a little more than that. There we go. And what that does is it'll darken it up. See, that's too much. Actually, no, I think that's just so close. So close. I'm gonna add a little more green. Bring it back more towards the green. We don't want it to look too brown. We're basically trying to mix a darker shadow variant of that color. Let's see. So that'll be good. Yeah, I think that's good. And what we'll do is, just to give you an example, I'm going to do little kind of like brush strokes like that, almost like the shape of a U, because when you pile them together, it'll look like shadows for the leaf bundles that are building up on the trees. So what I mean to say is, and try to use more of the pointy tip of your brush. Like the brush should have a pretty pointy tip, and what you're doing is you're just kind of like going like this, because the shadow, the light is coming from the top, maybe a little bit to the left, coming down to the right. And so what we're doing is we're just doing small U's here and there. It doesn't have to be anything, like more towards the bottom of the bundle of leaves, and we're just laying them in like that. Okay, there we go. And just putting them all in. Okay. And just like that. And you can kind of see the shadow building up. And I always like watching how laying in shadows immediately transforms objects from looking flat and two-dimensional to more three-dimensional. And we're doing the same thing for the plant back here. And there we go. Go ahead and rinse our brush. And then oops, see, I accidentally dripped onto the paper. There we go. As that's drying, I'm gonna go ahead and the sky blue that we have over here that we used earlier for the sky, I'm gonna grab more of it so that it's a stronger color. And that color, I'm just gonna test it out right there. Perfect. That color, we're going to go ahead and lay it into these little triangles. This line that runs right here on all of the roofs, we're going to avoid that. We're just going to leave that white, but in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and lay in that nice blue in here. Feel free to watch how I do it and then do it yourself, as opposed to doing it at the same time as me if you need to rewind, if it makes it easier. And again, do not worry if you go outside of the lines a little bit, that's totally fine. So we're just going to do this, like that, and that. Perfect. That's all we need there. I'm going to step back again just for a second. Okay, all of that looks pretty good. Now we're gonna do the bridge over here, now that all of this is dry. The way we'll do that is this color that we have here for that we used initially for the mixing of the river color. We're going to add a little bit of brown to it. Kind of move it more towards the gray. That looks good. And then we're going to add some water and some green to it. And that looks pretty good. That looks almost exactly like what we want to. Let me test it over here. See, it looks too much like the water. We'll get a little more green. Let's see. Yeah, that's better. You can kind of differentiate them more easily. And we are going to first use a lighter. I'm going to use more water, just so that the initial wash is lighter. And it looks pretty dark right now, but remember, it all dries fairly light. And again, I'm just doing a flat wash all in here. Get it all in there. And there's just one flat wash of that color, and then a little bit over here for the bars that are coming down, holding up the bridge, like that. It does not have to look perfect. And rinse our brush. So all of that looks pretty good so far. Oh, one thing that I did notice, I forgot to add some color into the building back here. We're gonna use the same color that we used for these buildings back here. I'm just gonna grab some, and then I'm just gonna lay it in. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just gonna leave some areas white of this building, and then I'm just gonna kind of throw it in. Yeah, that's all we really need. It's a quick fix. Okay. And now, while that's drying, we can actually focus a little bit on. I'm going to actually go back to this plate. We're going to create some shadows for the concrete that runs for the bridge, as well as the edge over here that meets the water. I'm going to make a little bit of a darker blue-gray. Grab that, a little bit of dark blue, and mix it in. Okay, that looks good. And then grab some green. Okay, that's maybe a little bit too much. I'm gonna grab a little more blue. There we go. And see how that's perfectly fine. And then we're just gonna outline a little bit where the trees would be casting a shadow. It does not have to be perfect. You're basically just trying to go in where the trees are and just a little bit of a shadow. And over here, same thing. And then the hatching that I made over here to show the shadow underneath the bridge, we're gonna do a little bit of an outline for some of it, not all of it. We're just gonna add some emphasis, a little bit of a curve following the underneath of the bridge. We can also add that a little bit right there, like that. And do that. A little bit of a line right there, just to show that there's some spacing from the way that the structure is. And also right here and right here, a little bit down there, just creating some distinction. Gives it more of a form, more of a three-dimensional look. Okay, so all of that looks great. The next thing, that we will do is grab just some of the blue, just straight dark blue. That's what we want. We don't want anything else, just straight dark blue. And let's see how that looks. That looks perfect. Remember, it will dry lighter. I can't reiterate that enough. We're just gonna add some outline back here, like that. Just some lines. Add a little bit of a squiggle. Technical term. A little bit of a squiggle to the lines. Kind of lay them in like that. Not too much. Does not have to be a lot. More towards the back, just because obviously the water further away will be darker. And then as you come out more towards the front, just thin them out, and then just add some, maybe where the black lines are, just a little bit like that, and then less so towards the front, just here and there. There we go. And grab some more back here, and more back here, and just kind of pull out a little bit of the lines, maybe more where the bridge post is. We'll go like that, like that. Okay, and I know what you're thinking, wouldn't the bridge be casting down the shadow onto the water? Yes, it would, but because of the angle and kind of like the depth, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just connect a little bit of a shadow from this post going down to this post, and it can be kind of rippled, but you can see you still want a little bit of lighter water back here, kind of forms like a triangle, but this is plenty. It kind of gives you that idea. Okay, let's step back again for a moment. And we're almost done. The only thing that's really left to do is add some shading back here to the mountain in the back, because the mountain obviously does get lighter as you get towards the top, so we will add some shading there. But also we can also just use this this dark outline that we used for the concrete. We can just throw it in right here where the bridge is. So you want to go in between these bars and then just lay it in kind of like that, somewhat carefully, but don't try to be perfect about it. This is all you need. This is all you need right there. And then this green that we have right here, we can just add more green to it, and more brown, and definitely more green. And then grab some dark blue, and let's see, how does that look? Perfect. And so what we'll do here is first we'll add some right down here. It gives it a nice dark contrast, and kind of coming around here and back here, and then this little edge. Okay, and now while it's still wet, I'm gonna rinse off our brush, dry it off a little bit. We still want a little bit of moisture there, and kind of fade it in. And that's all we're gonna do here. Just kind of fade it in, and then move some of that pigment around, dry our brush some more, and then just blend it. That's all. That's all that we need right there. Let me just step back and look at it again. Yeah, that looks perfect. I think we're done here. Okay, so that was it for that one. If you have questions, just leave them in the comments. I will try to answer them as soon as I can. And hopefully that was instructive enough to where things made sense. But that's pretty much it. And I will have the second page coming out very soon. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you soon.